Last week, the internet, I think, actually broke when Shannon Sharpe interviewed Katt Williams on his podcast, Club Shay Shay. I got to be honest with you, I'm a sports fanatic. I love comedy, but I don't typically listen to these types of podcasts. If it was fantasy football, things like that, absolutely. And then all of a sudden, my phone started blowing up. I started getting messages from all my friends who were like, hey, have you listened to this podcast? And so I opened up, I was like, y'all want me to listen to almost 3 hours of a conversation between Shannon Sharpe and Katt Williams? I'm like, I just don't know. But the more I began to see it, and honestly, when I saw, like, we're talking about millions of views in a matter of hours, I was like, you know what? I'm actually intrigued by what's taking place. And so I was working out and I decided to listen to it while I was working out. And y'all, I'll be honest, I was shocked. I was shocked for a couple reasons. One, Katt Williams consistently refers to Jesus and the Bible, and he frames his entire conversation around truth and lies, around the powers of good and the powers of darkness. And what I found the most fascinating is how many times Katt Williams explicitly just mentions Jesus. And so I began to think about the sheer fact that there will literally be millions of people, both Christians and non-Christians, that are going to listen to this podcast, are going to listen to this interview, that are going to essentially be taught and trained how to think and comprehend the world based off of this interview. And there are some pretty significant theological implications to what Katt and Shannon talk about. And so I was kind of curious, like, hey, should I even do this? Should I even attempt at trying to give a response, a theological response to some of the moments that stuck out to me that Katt and Shannon were talking about? And I decided to go ahead and do it. And here's why. I think it's really important that we engage culture. I think it's vitally important that we're not swayed by culture. And the only way for us to engage culture and not to be swayed by culture is for you and I to be rooted in the truth of the gospel of Jesus. We got to be rooted in the truth of the scriptures. And so this is kind of an exercise of theological engagement with culture, which is a lot of what you're going to find here on Humble Theology if you're watching on YouTube, or on Theology Talk if you're listening on Spotify or Apple podcasts. Like we're going to think critically, but compassionately and with an attentive and curious heart and mind, because there's something for us to learn, and there are some things that we are to reject. And so I want to jump in and I want to just kind of address 10 specific moments in this interview that I stopped and I wrote down the timestamp, and I was just like, this is absolutely fascinating. And so I'm going to play these clips for us. And so again, if you are listening on the Theology Talk podcast and you want to actually, see this, you can jump over to the Humble Theology YouTube channel, or just listen in over here. So I'm going to share this. Listen to this.
Race is not where the line is drawn. It's God's side and the other side. And we don't care nothing about the other side, period.
Like, this is pretty important. Notice what Katt says is, he starts with, hey, here's the reality. There is God's side, and then there's the other side. What Katt is trying to do is help us see that that there are two forces that are at work. Now, here's where theologically we have to just be precise with our language and our thinking. Yes, there are two sides, but this is not a yin and yang type of battle. This isn't like 50% good, 50% evil, 50% power on this side, 50% power on the other side. No. There's 100% power on the side of good. And there is a real enemy who is attempting through the supernatural realm, kind of coexisting inside of the earthly temporal realm, to disrupt all of God's goodness, to despoil shalom, to create chaos and dysfunction and disunity amongst all of creation. And so, yes, there are absolutely two sides. There's God's side, and there is everything else that is not on God's side. Now, what does this mean? This also means that there really isn't a neutral place when it comes to this conversation. Like, we're all working towards or for something or someone. And so if we think that we're Switzerland, like, we're not. We're either actively working to promote and to advance the kingdom of God, or we're part of, whether passive or active, the plan and scope and scheme of the other side. In the words of Katt Williams, I'd call it the side of darkness, of evil, in order to destroy and disrupt all of the goodness that God has for us. And so you'll notice this particular kind of idea consistently kind of being communicated here. And so again, I think it's really important for us to just pay attention to how he frames it. Okay, let's go to this next one. And again, this entire conversation is being framed by good and bad, by truth and lies. So here's the next clip that I thought was super fascinating.
These people are not powerful. Satan can't create anything. That includes blessings for his people.
Okay, again, fascinating. Satan can't create anything, including blessings for his people. Yeah, so yes, this is actually partially true. Satan cannot create absolutely anything he wants to create. Satan is a created being. Satan is a created being. However, very important for us to understand, Satan absolutely is able to corrupt things. And so while Satan can't create something out of nothing ex nihilo in the way that God can, Satan absolutely is in the business of corrupting things. And so when you think about receiving something from the enemy, or you think about experiencing some type of counterfeit goodness from the enemy, what we are experiencing is something that is good, that only God can create out of nothing, like good ex nihilo, something out of nothing, only God can do. So there's this goodness, innate goodness that God creates, and yet sin comes in and corrupts that goodness. And in the process of that corruption, the enemy is working to provide to you something that is actually broken and corrupted from the inside. And so what you have is a type of counterfeit goodness, a type of counterfeit blessing that it promises something good for you, but in the end, it actually is only delivering pain and chaos and devastation. And so yes, Satan can't create anything out of nothing, but and I guess I should say, Satan can absolutely corrupt the good things that God has created. So part of our task in this process is to look at the innately good things that God has created and to identify the ways in which the enemy has corrupted it. Think about this. Sexuality is a great one. God created sexuality for something very good. Like it was meant to be a blessing. It was meant to be something good, but there is a type of sin that steps into even sexuality that corrupts it and turns into something that was supposed to be absolutely pleasurable and good within the context of marriage and covenant. And yet now, because of sin and the corruption of this good thing, it can be devastating for people when it is experienced outside of the bounds of the goodness that God has created. I mean, you can go on and on. Food is good for us. Like, we're meant to enjoy the goodness of food, but an obsession with food, where food becomes an idol, that is a corruption of something that is good. Even like really good things, like exercise. Like yes, we should exercise. That's a good thing for us to exercise. But if we get obsessed with it, so much so that we actually attribute value, worth, and identity to the way our bodies look or don't look, this is a corruption of something that was actually very, very good, that the enemy can use to present to us like, hey, this is a blessing. Like, you want this? Here you go. It's good for you. But at its core, it's corrupted. And so part of our task as we're thinking theologically, as we're thinking spiritually, as we're just processing all of this, is to really, really consider, is there something that is innately good that the enemy has actually corrupted? And so Katt's absolutely right on this. Satan can't create anything ex nihilo, but he is absolutely able of corrupting things that are very, very good. Okay, let's go to the next one. Again, there are these ones that are just, again, I find them so fascinating.
Jesus was my big homie. So you know how you get a story about a dude joined the gang and you get a big homie, right? Like at this particular point in my life, my thought is that the Bible is the greatest book that's ever been written.
Okay.
That it houses the truth, and that it gives you this story of Jesus, and that I'm supposed to be like him.
Okay.
So it's
okay. This is like, again, absolutely fascinating to me. Katt grew up understanding that there's something to Jesus. He literally says, Jesus was my big homie. And notice how he came to the conclusion that Jesus was worth somebody pursuing, that Katt came to the understanding that the Bible was the greatest book ever written. It houses truth, and it gives the story of Jesus. So who is Jesus? Jesus is actually the embodiment of truth itself. And then Katt goes like, I just want to be like him. Like this is absolutely powerful. There's a part in the interview here where we found out that Katt's like a ferocious reader. He says, I don't know if it's believable, not, whatever, absolutely possible, I guess, that he consumed over 2,000 books in a year and was just a ferocious reader for many years of his childhood. And one of his first tasks was actually to go through the entire encyclopedia. If y'all don't know what an encyclopedia is, it's kind of like the books that you kind of see behind me, but big, massive books that are based off the alphabet. I don't know how to say that word. Based off of the alphabet. And you can read through them. Like it tells you like a dictionary, like everything that you need to know about it. And he went through, and this is fascinating again to me, that here's somebody who has literally, based on what he said, like he's read through the entire encyclopedia. He has read about some pretty fascinating things. And yet the one book that is the greatest book that is ever written is the Bible, the scriptures. And what makes the Bible the greatest book ever written? Jesus. Jesus is what makes the Bible the greatest book ever written. Why? Because the Bible is one cohesive story. You've heard me say this before. The Bible is made up of 66 individual books. So the Bible itself isn't a book. The Bible is a library, 66 individual books penned by 40 different human authors, all being led, inspired, and directed by one divine author around 3 continents with 3 languages over 2,000 years. Like we're talking about something that is fascinating, and it all communicates one story. It's the story of Jesus. It's the story of God who desires to have his family back together. And so the central pivot point of the scriptures is the story of Jesus. And here's Katt, who's literally, I mean, like, think about this, that at the time that I'm recording this, probably 30 million views. There are literally 30 million people, and probably significantly more, that have literally heard this testimony that Jesus is the big homie. The Bible is the greatest book ever written. What makes the Bible the greatest book ever written? It tells the story of Jesus. And if you believe this, like if you believe in the Bible and you believe Jesus is who he said he was, then why wouldn't we want to be like him? It is absolutely amazing to me that he would say this, and he was so impacted by this. And I think there's something that you and I can absolutely learn from it. All right, let's go to the next clip.
Team, you don't only like, okay, Mom, I'm moving out. You moved from Ohio to Florida on your own. You weren't afraid. I mean, you like, did you?
Hold on.
Did you not have? So what were you gonna do when you got to Florida?
Don't say I wasn't afraid. There's no such thing as a human being of not being afraid.
Okay.
There are certain human beings that understand that being afraid in no way stops you from doing what you got to do.
Okay.
So I was afraid, but I couldn't be that afraid because I knew what had happened with Jesus. I knew how it worked out. I knew that I wasn't in the wrong with how I was feeling, and I knew that I didn't have any bad intentions in it.
Right.
So I trusted God that it would work out.
Why Florida?
I mean, again, it's this consistent kind of return to Jesus. And so Katt's like, yes, everybody's afraid. There's not one human being that isn't afraid. I mean, here's something that Katt is getting at that I would just say explicitly, like I truly do believe that Jesus experienced fear. How? Why? Jesus is the Son of God. Well, Hebrews tells us that Jesus was like us in our humanity in every way, that in the hypostatic union that Jesus was 100% God and he was 100% man. And the text of Philippians 2, it lets us know that Jesus takes on humanity. He puts on the clothing of humanity, and so he experiences all the emotions that you and I would have experienced. Like, do we really honestly think that Jesus did not experience some form or high levels of fear, anxiety, and just concern as the days leading up to the cross? Like, he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, y'all. He is bleeding. Like, he's bleeding from his head, from burst capillaries around his head because of the anxiety of what he knows he is about to endure. Jesus understands our pain. He understands our fear. And again, I just I find it, again, fascinating. You're going to hear me say this all the time. I find it fascinating. I find it fascinating that at these pivotal moments, the thing that got Katt through, it seems like, the thing that is what will enable you and I to get through, not around, not under, not short circuit stuff, but to actually get through it, is a consistent return to Jesus. Like, Jesus went through it. Jesus walked through it. Jesus is walking through it with you today. That there is not one thing that that you and I can experience and walk through that Jesus is not empathetic to, that he is not considerate to, that he does not he's not willing to love us through. And that should be incredible encouragement for you and I today. All right, let's go to the next one.
It's anything once I left home that I hadn't signed up for. If anything, it saved my life. Me being homeless for that small.
Really quick, he's talking about a season of his life when he's being homeless, and Shannon is talking to him about what that experience was like. One of the big things that Katt talks about is the fact that he's never done any hard drugs, and he's not been kind of committed over to those things.
A period of time allowed me to see all of the people that were in that situation, and to see that these were lawyers and doctors and
he's talking about his time while he was living homeless, and he was around all these people that were addicted. And so he's just saying, hey, I'm seeing all these different types of people. There were lawyers, there were doctors. Like, this is the people that he was around as a young kid when he was living homeless.
Teachers, and that these people were white and black and Asian and Indian, and the only thing that all of these homeless people had in common was they made a bad decision and aligned themselves with drugs. And I interviewed them all. What drug? What? And guess what, Shannon? Nobody had a great story. Nobody had a great story of what meth had done for them, what crack had done for them, what cocaine had done for them, what heroin had done for them, what speed had done for them. Nobody had them stories. Everybody's story was, I had my life together, and then I decided to do this dumb thing. And I lost my wife, I lost my house, I lost my cars, I lost my reputation.
It's brutal. Right? I mean that is, it's brutal. And notice what Katt is saying to us. Like, he experienced this, he interviewed all of these people, and in the midst of experiencing this and interviewing all these people and really trying to understand their situation and how they got themselves into this massive mess, he comes to this conclusion. Like, look, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're people just like you and I. They had a great life. They had everything going for them. They made one tragic mistake. They made one massive mistake. And they're living that situation, understanding exactly what that mistake is. I can't imagine what it would be like or feel like to be in that situation. But I think it's a good exercise for you and I to just consider it. To know that you and I are one decision, one simple and yet significant mistake away from being in that exact same spot. This was seems like it was a definitive moment for Katt, that he's like, there's nothing about this that I want. There's nothing good here. Whatever temptations, whatever high these drugs can potentially promise to us is really just a massive deceit, because it's going to put us into a pit, into a prison of self-destruction. Like, why would we do that? But what I think is really important here is not just thinking individualistically of like how it impacts me personally and why I wouldn't do it, but being aware and humble enough and having our eyes open enough to seeing the impact that it's had on other people. It's by actually being aware and seeing and considering the situation that is out in front of us that we can actually make wise decisions for ourselves. This is a life lesson for us. This is one of those proverbial kind of truths that we can all take into consideration. And so I think this one is incredibly important. This is also what leads Katt later on to talk about, and we're going to share this one next, why being sober-minded, like why, that's my phrase, sober-minded, but why it is so important for us to make sure that we don't compromise our mind, what we can do, how we think. Like that compromise of the mind is a serious issue. This is what Katt says about that.
Anything that take over your free will is the devil itself.
Okay. Anything that takes over your free will is the devil itself. This is massive. Katt is absolutely onto something incredibly significant. I just want to read a couple passages for you. Here's one, 1 Peter 5:8. It says this: be sober-minded, be alert. Your adversary, the devil, is prowling around like a roaring lion, looking for anyone he can devour. A little bit of Greek and Hebrew, or actually just Greek. Just a little bit of Greek here for us. That word sober-minded is the Greek word nepho. And the opposite of this word sober-minded is a word that's used to describe drunkenness. It's matheo. It means to be intoxicated with nectar, or used to describe the state of mystical enthusiasm and union with the deity. Interestingly, in the letters of Paul, that word matheo or mete, it appears in two vice lists, where it's cataloged as a work of darkness and a work of the flesh. This is Romans 13:12-13 and Galatians 5:21. So the idea that Paul is giving us is, hey, be sober-minded, be of clear conscience. Don't engage and participate in things that's going to actually cloud your judgment, that's going to manipulate your mind, that's going to open you up to an alternate view and way of thinking. Why? Because there's a real enemy who, at the moment he sees that you're incapacitated and unable to think rightly, is absolutely going to pounce on you, absolutely going to mess you up. This is why that opposite word, meta, is used in the two vice lists, and they're connected to the works of darkness. Be sober-minded, right? Have the mind of Christ. Don't be compromised in your thinking, but be rooted in the truth. Like all of this is really important. And this actually plays pretty specifically into the very next thing that Katt's going to talk about. He's going to talk about his exploration of religion. So he grew up in a religious childhood. He had a religious childhood. His parents were very religious. and it didn't sit well with him. There's a difference, it seems to me. This is just my understanding of listening to the interview and kind of piecing some things together. It seems to be there was a difference between what he read about Jesus in the scriptures to the religious environment that he grew up in. Again, many of us can probably relate to that. And yet what this led for him is to explore all of the different religions. And so Shannon asks him a question about this exploration, and this is what Katt says.
Let me explain.
Yes.
Because my particular background was already religious and super strict, right? I didn't find out about other religions by reading about them. I went to their religion. I don't want to learn from Jewish people from outside. I want to be in a synagogue. I don't want to learn about Muslim people I want to be in a mosque. I don't want to hear about the Baptist or the Pentecostal. I want to go to their church and see. And so that was the religious discovery that I was on.
Okay. I think there's a couple things here that are really important for us. One is there's something here that Katt is saying that I just so appreciate. I just want to kind of be honest with this. I really appreciate his thoughtfulness and his just awareness of not wanting to rely on secondhand information to figure out and to understand the truth of what something actually is. I think about it this way. One of the best ways for you and I to share the gospel and the good news of Jesus is for us to actually invite other people into the church, into our lives, to experience God's goodness in and through our lives in such a way that they can have a firsthand account of what's actually taking place. So they can say, yeah, I believe that, or no, I don't believe that. Like that is a powerful witness, right? And there's also, I would say, a little bit of a concern. I don't know if it's concern. Yeah, I think it's concern that I would just, or maybe a caution that I would just give you a caution that when we're talking about the religions of the world, in these religions of the world, all follow after false gods. I use the phrase false gods, but I think it's really important for us to recognize that when I say false gods, I'm not talking about false in the terms of non-existent. I'm talking about false in the terms of they are not the one true God. They're not the creator of all things. They are created beings. Who are these created beings? They're the fallen sons of God of the Old Testament that if you read, I got to do a video on this at some point, but the Deuteronomy 32 worldview that based on Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9 as read with the Dead Sea Scrolls and alongside of the Septuagint, that God for a season allocated the sons of God to the nations in order to guard them and protect them. He took Israel as his own inheritance so that he could bring them all back together. And yet these sons of God go into total rebellion. They don't guard, they don't rule over, they don't protect them underneath the authority of God. They actually take worship. They go into full-blown idolatry. And in so doing, this is the genesis. This is the foundation of the false religions, the false gods, the nations of the world. And this is the background of the entire Old Testament of what's actually taking place, is that there are actual real supernatural spiritual entities that are fighting in such a way in order to corrupt and to usurp God's kingdom and to destroy his people. And so there has to be an awareness that in our exploration of the other religions of the world, we have to just be aware that this isn't just fabricated. There's a reason why some of these religions have stuck around for so many years, generations, thousands of years. It's because there are dark powers at play behind that are manipulating and deceiving humanity. And so one, I would just urge you to have some self-awareness, pray, ask the Holy Spirit, have some people around you that are close to you to just confirm, like, hey, I have this desire to learn about the religions of the world. Would you pray for me? Would you just stay in touch with me? Would you just give me some advice, maybe even on my spiritual maturity, where I'm at, if this is a good idea for me or not? And if it's not, that's probably a good invitation for you to dig deeper into the scriptures yourself, so you can know exactly what God's word says, so that as you are comparing the truth of the gospel with the counterfeit truth of the religions of the world, you're able to decipher, oh yeah, here's how people get confused. This is 80% truth, but y'all, 80% truth with 20% error is still false. And so this is where we have to be really careful. I've got a really good friend. His name is Jeremy Jenkins, and he's got an Instagram handle called All Things All People. And he runs a ministry organization. I'll actually link to that in the captions or in the notes section of this episode. And Jeremy does exactly what Katt is describing here. Jeremy is I would consider him a leading of our generation, a leading scholar, theologian, and just mind when it comes to the religions of the world, and as a Christian, how to engage with these religions. Jeremy has been to India to study Hinduism. He has been to mosques and to synagogues. Like, he has done exactly what Katt was talking about, what he did in his process to kind of figure out what is actually happening. Jeremy has done that with his team, and he's put an entire kind of organization together to equip us with resources so that if we don't have the time, the space, the capacity, I mean, I personally go to Jeremy on different questions when it comes to specific world religions, because we need that kind of help. And so I'm grateful for the people that are out there that are already doing this in such a way that we can engage and learn, and still be careful in the process. Now, dovetailing to this idea, so the religions of the world, there's specific language that Katt uses that we really need to catch and to be aware of. There is a lot of conversation of the Bible and of Jesus and all of that, but there are other terms that Katt uses that should, in our minds, as we're thinking about this, we should be thinking like, wait a minute, huh? What does that mean? And what do you actually mean when you say that phrase? So here's one. Let's see if you guys can catch it.
Your talent doesn't support it. You should fall by the wayside, and the guys that have the talent and that get elevated, they should move.
No, that's
Here they're talking, just as context, they're talking about people who are good at their skill, people who are not good at their skill, talking about acting, athletes. And so basically like, hey, if you're excellent at what you do, you should rise to the top. And if you are not excellent at what you do, then you should probably not rise to the top. So I'm going to play that for you.
progress. The guys that are not as good, they should fall down by the wayside. That's natural.
So you believe if your talent doesn't support it, you should fall by the wayside, and the guys that have the talent and that get elevated, they should move.
No, that's what water says. That's what the universe say. The universe say the levels. No, not I say. Who am I? I'm nobody.
Okay,
but I'm
that? He's like, no, not me, not I. I don't say that. This is what the universe is saying. Not I, the universe. Now, this is the first time that Katt talks about the universe. Actually, technically, it's the second time. He has a phrase about the universe before that. And so you're going to notice a conflation of terms or thoughts or ideas. And so, again, just think about this. What does that mean? When we say the universe is saying this, what are you and I attributing to the universe? What are you and I saying is true about the universe, right? Okay, again, this isn't the only time. Let's go to the next time that he says it. And again, fascinating. Here we go.
They wanted to give me a star, but please don't consider me in this.
Okay, again, for context, I keep forgetting to do this. For context, they're talking about somebody who, a gal who's a comedian that deserved a star on Hollywood, I think it was. And she was passed over, essentially, because she didn't have money. There's some complexities to the way the industry is run. And Katt's like, hey, like, I'm there. Like, I'm already in the Comedy Hall of Fame, like all this other stuff. So the context is around this individual who has literally been passed over, not because she didn't deserve it, but simply because she didn't have the money, potentially, supposedly.
This person been sitting on this list this whole time, and just because they ain't got enough money, they can't get their just due. That's crazy. When do you start? That's hurtful. What if somebody can't afford their flowers? You mean they don't get them? No, God don't operate like that. He was sending a dummy like me to come and take care of that, just so that the right thing happens. That's how the universe works.
All right. You see that? Like, what I love about this is, this is exactly how God works. This is exactly how God works. This is exactly how, like he will use anybody and everybody for the sake of his goodness, for the sake of elevating the people that he wants to be elevated, and to make sure that his will is actually done. Like, there's so many passages of scripture that talk about how God is using the weak and the vulnerable and the downcast in order to show his power and his might. And so there's a part of this I just love about what Cass is like, no, like, God can use a dummy like me. Like, no, I'm like, so that's great. But then at the very end, he says, this is how the universe works. So the third time, why am I so concerned about this? God and the universe are not the same thing. God is uncreated. The universe is created. God is eternal, past, present, and future. All of creation has a beginning point, and what we know as creation right now, it actually has a definitive end point before the new heavens and the new earth are going to be recreated and restored and renewed. Like the universe itself is a created entity. It is a not even an entity. That's the wrong word. It is a created reality. The universe is not sentient. The universe itself does not have a will, doesn't have an ambition, doesn't have motivation. The universe itself does not decree this is what should be and this is what should not be. Like, that is not the role of the universe. When we do that, when we conflate what is true exclusively of God and we place it onto the universe as if the universe is the one that is doing something grand and gracious, we're being conned and manipulated into believing that the universe is so much more than it is. It's not. The universe is what you and I as created beings, we live in. The universe was created, but God is the creator. God is the one who's working in and through creation within time and space. God is the one who saw fit for Jesus the Messiah to come to redeem and restore all of humanity. God is the one who's a good father who desires for his family to come back together. God is the one, no, not the universe. It's God. And so I think it's really important to not to just be so, I want to be like just clear, crystal clear. No, it is not the universe. It is God. Here's the last one, and this is the one that probably shook me the most. It shook me the most. Katt has adopted 7 kids, and Shannon, at one point, you're going to hear here in the interview, Shannon is just kind of wondering, like, why? Like, why'd you do that? Why did you adopt these children? And this was Katt's response.
If there was a God, what would he think about you if you did that? I'm saying, let's say, for example,
Okay.
that God is real.
Yes.
Okay. And let's say he be looking at what you do.
Yes.
What would he say if you did that?
He said, that Katt, that's a very kind gesture. That's very generous of you.
My whole life, since I was telling you when I was young and they was asking me what I wanted to be, and nothing I wanted to be was what I wanted to be, God's friend. That's a weird thing if you're an atheist. If you're an atheist, I didn't even say nothing. But if you believe in God and I tell you that I wanted to be God's friend and I wanted to even go to Hollywood and still be God's friend, if I told you that that was my aim, you could understand where I'm at. Like,
his whole aim, he just wants to be God's friend. Can you imagine that? Well, I hope you can. I hope you can imagine that. What would it be like to know that you are the friend of God? Yeah, you're a child of God, but you're also a friend. That both of those things could coexist together. What a powerful thought. I think of John 15:14, where Jesus is talking. And Jesus says this to his disciples, to all of us, really saying, he's like, you're my friends if you do what I command you to do. Like, there's something that's beautiful in what Katt is just saying. He's like, man, I'm doing this because, like, remember earlier, he was like, the Bible talks about Jesus. I believe that, like the Bible is the greatest book ever told, and Jesus seems to be legit. Like, I'm kind of putting words into Katt's mouth here, but like, you can go back and listen to that section, and that frame that did something to him. To the point where all the way here, 2-hour mark into the interview, he finally just says, like, my whole life since I was a kid, I wanted to be God's friend. I wanted to get to Hollywood and still be God's friend. Now, here's where I think it's really important for us to recognize theologically and practically and spiritually. Like, you and I are God's friend. But this is incredibly important. And even what Jesus is talking about here, like when he says, you're my friends if you do what I command you to do, that our doing is not in order for you and I to achieve salvation. Like, salvation has been given to us, granted to us freely by the finished work of Jesus on the cross. This friendship, though, is absolutely connected to the overflow of our gratitude and our love and our appreciation for what Jesus has done for us. Like, why wouldn't we want to be a people who do this for others? Why wouldn't we want to be a people that share the testimony of God's goodness in our lives to them? Like, why wouldn't we want to participate in that? So this isn't a works-based righteousness where we do and do and do and maybe we can be God's friend. It's no, we're children first because of what Christ has already accomplished on the cross. And then we experience the friendship of Jesus as we're just faithfully living and working out the reality of the finished work of the cross in and through our lives. There's a lot here. I don't necessarily recommend that everybody goes and listens to this entire interview. That wasn't the point. Like, I'm not promoting this interview. I'm not promoting Katt Williams and his stand-up. I'm not promoting Shannon Sharp. I mean, like, that's not the point. But the point is that there have already been, there will continue to be millions and millions of people. And there will be a small little tiny, like, minuscule fraction of those people that even listen to this or watch this. And yet, if you're a believer, if you're a Christian, or if you know somebody who's a skeptic, who's thinking critically, who's just fascinated by this conversation as much as I would, like, I would just encourage you to maybe share this YouTube video or to share this podcast episode so that you can give a very tangible example of what it means to think theologically, to think the thoughts of God after him, and to engage with culture in such a way that that we want to engage but not be consumed by, manipulated by culture. We want to bring the truth of the gospel into the very midst of culture and be able to engage with it and to say, yeah, this is beautiful, and yet this needs reorientation. This is false, and this needs to be addressed with the truth of the gospel. And so hopefully I was able to model some of that with you. In the comments or whatever, feel free to just jot your own thoughts, your own ideas, areas of agreement, areas of confusion, things you're like, ooh, I'm not quite sure about that. I welcome all of that. I'm so grateful for the opportunity for you and I to just think God's thoughts after him, to do theology through a posture of humility.